Hey, Clear Lake peeps. Ross England here with Clear Lake Guide Service. We're out on the water this morning. It is your weekly fishing report, August 29th, 8:02 a.m. I only have a short time out here this morning, so I'm going to fish while I talk. The conditions this week, water temperature 82 to 83 degrees. Kind of depends on where you are, as always. Water clarity varies from anywhere, like where I am here right now. It's about a foot, maybe a foot and a half. Some areas, especially down south, I could see up to 4 feet, which is pretty good for this time of year. Wind's been pretty much under control this week. It's really not been that bad of a week, although I have to stop short of saying that, the bite is actually great. It's not. It seems to me like it's a little bit harder to get bit than it was. But the flip side of that is we didn't catch a lot of really short fish this week. When we caught one, it was a little bit better one. And by a little bit better, I mean we had a lot of our fish were good solid 3-pound fish. Our biggest one was a 5. The bite kind of all over the board still. There is a jig bite. I told you last time that that thing for me had kind of slowed down a little bit, and it had for me. But there's still guys catching fish, throwing jigs. We kind of found that we kind of had to switch up and get away from the plastics, because by throwing plastics, what we were doing is catching some really, really short fish, and honestly, for what I was looking for, not that many of them. So we caught some fish on square bills, caught some fish on swim jigs, chatterbaits, topwater, frogs, whopper ploppers, poppers, that kind of stuff. So right now I'm just out here goofing off this morning, trying to see if I can catch a few fish before I have to take my wife to the airport. She's going to get away for a weekend. Yay for her. She works her tail off. So I've already caught 3 this morning, just goofing off. I wanted to get this thing knocked out so I could get it done and stay on track. I'm just fishing an area that I honestly haven't fished, although I fish it quite a bit during certain times of the year. I think we're going to find that we're in for a really good fall. I mean, we're coming to the end of August right now. And from what I'm seeing, with really the small amount of weeds that we have around the lake, that stuff's all going to be gone here, within the next month. It'll all start disappearing. Keep in mind, Clear Lake is way different than the reservoirs. We have 10 to 12 turnovers a year based on just water movement around the lake. So, we've got a lot of current that creates water movement. So we don't go through the traditional fall thing of, having to deal with turnover in the reservoirs, which is nice. But what we're going to see happen as these days start getting shorter, the life of these weeds and grass starts coming to an end. We're going to start seeing a lot of this stuff breaking up and kind of drifting around. But we'll also start to see a little bit of change in water clarity. This year, we really didn't have the algae blooms that we've had in the past. Not that we didn't have them, but they weren't to the extent. So water conditions this year have been really, really good. So looking at this fall, hey, traditionally once you start rolling into September, the crankbait starts to get to be a big deal, whether it's a rattle bait or a deep diving crankbait, anywhere in between. Frog will still be a big player if you can find these areas that still have a little bit of grass in them. Topwater, believe it or not, will still be a really good, strong player. You'll start to see some fish starting to chase smaller glide baits, like the S-Waver, those kind of baits. We've caught some really nice fish on those this time, coming into September. They haven't seen the baits for a while, so they get a little bit more aggressive with them and actually eat them. At least that's in my opinion. So, fishing pressure has been extremely light. There's nothing going on this weekend except for, of course, it's Labor Day weekend. So, I expect the lake to be a little bit busier. But, when we first started coming up here, one of the reasons we fell in love with the Clear Lake area was because we could come up here on a holiday weekend and not feel pressured. And that's still the case. So, don't be afraid to come up. The fishing's good. Weather looks like it's going to cooperate from a perspective that we've got some cool days still ahead of us. It's funny, I remember the days when we first started coming up here in September with the club out of Stockton, the Bass Rustlers, and we'd get here on some of those first weeks of September and it'd be 102, 103 all week long. Just miserable. I mean, you thought you were going to die. Back in those days, we didn't have weeds. It was all just algae on the surface. So it was pretty much a mess. This weather, much, much nicer, much easier to be in, way easier to tolerate. The only thing you have to watch out for is the wind. Usually not so much on this end of the lake that I'm fishing today, but the lower end. Once you get below the Narrows, it tends to get kind of windy. So just be careful of it, but there's still a lot of fish to be caught. We had an interesting mix of fish. I made a perfect cast on a dock with a chatterbait, or at least for me it was a perfect cast. And boy, I brought that thing by there and got whacked by a 12-pound channel cat. Of course, the first couple of seconds of that fight, you think, okay, I did it. This is cool. This is going to be fun. And it was fun. Just the wrong species. The good news, because it was a catfish, it fought a lot harder and a lot longer than a bass did. But we also caught a couple of crappie. It was kind of interesting. I did a little bit more looking around, just spending time with the graph, idling around in areas where, I thought there should be fish. And sure enough, there's fish there, but most of the schools that I saw were not bass. At least it didn't look like it to me. It looked like they were crappie. So that's kind of your fishing report going into Labor Day weekend. Be safe. Have a good time. Sorry couldn't catch a fish while I was doing this. This is the second time I've fished while I was doing a report, and I've stunk both times. That's what happens when you give yourself 6.5, 7 minutes to catch a fish. Sometimes it just doesn't work. But I appreciate you guys and gals watching. Look for us on Clear Lake Guide Service, YouTube, on our website, Clear Lake Guide Service, and on Facebook. Guess what? Clear Lake Guide Service. Real original bunch here. So, thanks for watching. You guys have a good weekend. Behave yourselves. Caleb, take care of Mama.